Father, we come to you humbly and thank you for the opportunity that you've given us this evening and throughout this whole process. We're humbled by the fact that you're offering this opportunity to us. Let us make the most of it. Now be with us and lead, guide us, and direct us as we do what it is that we're trying to do up here. And be with us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'll call the roll. Please make sure your mics are on, all committee members. Andrew Henry, present. Kevin Ferris.
Present.
Dr. Sanders.
here.
Mr. Ellis told us he is running late because of traffic, so we will count him in when he gets here. Scott Reynolds.
Present.
Don Durnall.
Present.
Mike Corman. Present. Thank you.
All right. Approval of the minutes from March 11th, 2026.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Got a motion, Don second.
Minutes from March 11th. Any discussion or correction on the minutes? There was only one spelling change, one spelling correction from the copy that was circulated ahead of the meeting digitally.
Sorry.
Hello, William.
Thanks. Hey there. Sorry I'm late to everybody.
Are we ready to call the roll?
Yes.
Great. I vote yes.
Yes.
Kevin, yes. Dr. Sanders?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we have a hard stop again at 6:50, but is there anybody that wants to make a public comment to get us started? Just come up to the mic and state your name, please.
I'm David Willoughby. Actually, I'm a township board member, but on this reorganization, I have a lot of questions that I think need answered. And I've talked to a lot of people, they asked me too, but okay, the first one is, what will, and some of this I've been told one way and some of it I've told the other way, so I hope we could get it straight tonight. So what will happen to the elected trustee if the reorganization happens?
Did you want to take that one, Dawn?
Take that. The trustee that will be elected this fall, that position will continue with the town of Ellettsville as the Director of Public Assistance.
Okay, so that will continue for the next 4 years.
Well, it will be, most likely be an employee position.
It'd be what?
An employed position, not an elected position.
Right. And will that, well then, I guess I put, who will administrate the trustee's office? Well, I guess it'll be the elected officers, but will that be, administrator be on a salary, or will it be an employee punching a time clock?
It'll be a director, the title is Director of Public Assistance, so it's going to be like a department head, so a salaried position.
Okay. And with that, I assume then the administrator, director, or whatever, they'll be able to pretty much be free to come and go as they need. There's a lot of things in the township that trustee, well, I still call it a trustee,
Yeah.
that needs to leave and see about things
Yes,
without just sitting in the office,
yes.
okay? And what is going to happen to the 3 elected township board members?
We have, under the finance subcommittee, there's the township subcommittee is within that, and they have recommend 2 different recommendations for either a 7-member or a 9-member board for the interim, at least, what is it, 2 years? And depending on which one is chosen, at least 2 of the board members that are elected will go on to be on the town council. If the 7-member is chosen, if it is the 9-member, then all 3 of them will be on the town council until that 4-year term is up.
So let me get this straight. Two of the board members would be on the council of either 7 or 9?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. That part seems a little lopsided to me. Mainly being there's more people in the township than there is in the town.
Right, but for right now, we can't, the election that we're having is for the town council and for the trustee's office and the board, and then also for the reorganization. So we can't have, if this goes through, who do you want to be on your town council? Because we're going to have, when this is done, if it goes through, there's going to be 5 voting districts for the entire, what is currently the township that will be the town. And then it'll be a 7, going forward, it'll be a 7-member board, and each one of those 5 districts will get to pick 1 person that lives in their district, and then there'll be 2 at large.
Okay.
So it will be more evenly distributed once this 4-year term is up.
And they will, well, after this, when the next election comes around, these will all be elected offices?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I guess I'd ask too, you probably answered my, I asked how many people are on the town council currently,
5.
which is 5, okay. And I've had a question too, and this, you may not like to hear it, but I've heard a lot of times, and I don't know how many times, but I think a couple the council members didn't show up enough to have a quorum. Has that happened?
Yes.
And
One time.
Well,
one time.
No, you mean town council members? Or?
That
Not the reorganization.
that you couldn't have a meeting,
Okay, but
For the town council?
town council.
Yes, that has happened more times than I would like to say.
Okay. I have been on some boards, and we've had problems like that before. And the bottom line, which I recommend to do like that, we just deducted, it was all brought out, but we just deducted a certain amount for not showing up. Unless they had a terrible sickness or something, but
State law prevents us from doing that.
because a lot of times maybe there's a nice basketball game on, something
Right.
like that. Guy, he just don't want to go, but he's getting paid.
Yeah, I don't think I think a 7-member board with those
Okay.
running for township trustee and those running currently, I don't think will have as much of an issue. But the expectation has to be that this is a duty to the public, and that unless there's extreme circumstances, and you shouldn't just miss it.
Okay. And the only thing I'll say, maybe it was just the committee stuff that I was on, but once we post a fine or deduct from salary, I'll tell you, attendance did pick up.
Oh, I agree.
So, okay,
Mr. Willoughby,
I guess
may I ask you a question?
sure.
Which would you prefer when it comes to the organization of the new town council? Would you prefer the township board, those elected, it's pulled from there for the reorganized town council and have 7 starting right away? Or what was the other one? 9? And then 2 would only be temporary. I'll tell you my thoughts. I'm leaning towards the 7 permanently because I think it would be a problem. How do we determine who's temporary? But this way we start getting everybody into the cycle. But I just want to know what you think.
I'm sorry, I'm really having just a little trouble hearing.
Okay.
I don't know why, but, So if you could-
There's, no problem. There's two proposals that we've been given from the governance committee. There's one that, I don't know if they specified, but at one time I'd heard the top two vote getters from the township board would be those that come on to the town council.
Okay.
The other proposal is we would still have a permanent 7-member board, but in the interim, have 9 members. And those other 4 would come from the township. But then, other two, yes, yeah, the other 2. But then those other 2 would eventually go away. And we'd have to figure out when and which 2 is temporary. So what I was saying is I'm leaning towards the 7-member board and doing it the top 2 vote getters for the township. I worry from voters it's going to be confusing. We run for 9 this time, or, we have 9, but they're not really 9. It's really a 7-person board. So I don't know what your thoughts are being a township board member and potentially one of those top 2 vote getters.
I'd say a 7-member board,
Okay.
top two vote getters.
Okay.
And I guess that's all I have.
All right.
Do we answer your questions though?
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to hear that. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to looking at the district voting map.
You guys have, is this the big one?
It doesn't have yours in it, though.
I think, isn't this the one,
That's it.
the most recent revision? Has everyone got a chance to look at this?
You don't have this?
I got it. Then you play that off yourself.
No, that was here.
You got one more.
That's the same as this one, right?
Yes.
You get the bonus ones.
Here.
I'll take the big one. I can read it.
Okay.
And that one, for the record, is a 4.2 variance.
Is that the same?
Let me check.
Because I printed that off of your email.
Yeah, the only difference in that is Bloomington at the corner was part of those that were Richland City. So for the most part, yes.
Okay.
You want to tell, I don't know if you have it with you or not, but the population of each one of the districts? It's in there? Oh, is this it? Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So to recap for some people who may not have been at the last meeting where we first saw these maps, there's going to be 5 districts. There is a state guideline, best practice, but not a hard number, where we're trying to get no more than plus or minus 10% population equivalency across all 5 districts, and redraw them in such a way that does not needlessly complicate where the voting lines fall in a way that makes campaigning and election setup and everything else difficult. So we have a variety of proposals ranging from a 4.2% population variance up to a 9% population variance, each with slightly different borders to consider.
Some of them are more complicated because there's areas from each district in another district.
Yeah, the uneven population density meant that to get the district's population balanced, you had little carve-outs and carve-ins that don't fall where we normally think of neighborhoods starting and ending, just because you needed to have more people over here or fewer people over here in order to maintain the desired population equivalency.
So last time we were looking at this, we were all leaning, I think, toward well, I'm not going to say what anybody else was doing, but we were talking about the 9% as in some ways being the most geographically well-designed, if you will.
And that was
But
also
then
the
it-
one Mr. Shelton recommended.
Right, but then it looks like the more recent map, the one that's been rendered on the computer, it's 4.2%, is a little bit different from any of the ones that we've looked at before. And I'm just looking for whether anybody has clarification. Is that because of the impact of subtracting the bits of Bloomington in the southeast corner and adding the bits of,
What it did, the other map, when we look to especially districts 4 and 5 that are running this year, District 3 would have been expanded, so the person that's running, one of the potential people that could get elected for one of the districts in 4 would now be in District 3. But then next year, we have Districts 1, 2, and 3 coming up, but then we'd already have someone living in District 3, so we couldn't have somebody run in District 3, which would cause, so, Dave looked at that and then he redid them. So he took our feedback, and as you can see on some of the other ones in these neighborhoods here, they're not as,
Right.
so he smoothed it out and actually was able to get it a little bit more uniform. And District 1 is a lot larger, but at the same time, District 1, the population is spread out more. And that is really a lot of it. District 5 has some of it. District 3 has some of the township. So does District 2. With the understanding that when the census comes in, we'll have more growth in the township. So we'll still have the same amount of districts, but then all things, because we won't be redoing the maps mid-cycle like we would now. This would get us till the census.
Till 30,
Yeah,
2030.
yeah, 2030.
So the 4.2 map gets us a slightly better rate of population equivalency. It avoids having to stutter step the election cycle and have people get rezoned into other districts after they've been elected.
Right.
Okay.
And it's a lot easier for the voters to understand because it doesn't have all the implant.
The current one that's shown on the screen is the latest proposal at 4.2%. That is the most recent requested clarification from Mr. Shelton.
And the one I had sent to the Reorganization Committee, I don't know if you heard the conversation. The big difference was this little area in the corner here, it's actually the city of Bloomington, and that wasn't taken care of. It didn't affect the population much because I think there's very few people that live there, but we didn't want to approve a map that had
Contain people who are
jurisdiction.
not in our district. Yeah.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So the map that's on the overhead right now includes those voters up in Bean Blossom Township that are part of the town, correct?
Yes.
That's that yellow, okay, good, thank you.
Should we solicit public comment on that?
Before we have a motion.
Yeah.
I like the 4.2% map, the most recent one. It's straight, it's, I think evenly dispersed as best you can for simplicity, with the understanding that, you know, here we are in 2026, it's gonna change again in 2031 or 2032 anyway. So, with that, I will make a motion to accept this most current one. I guess we'll call it the 4.2%
Okay.
map. That's my motion.
Dawn seconds.
At this point, I'd like to see if anybody from the public has any comments on the district maps. Yes, sir, come on up.
Can we get him the handheld mic and not have him have to get all the way up? Or, no?
Yeah, Jim Perry. The most common structure is not districts, but at large in the country as a whole. So, and we're talking about districts or wards, which is, I think, the current terminology, but a majority of, I think, of governments around the country use at large. And so, you know, the sort of splitting numbers on 4% or 6% or 9% or some other is not necessary if one were to say, hey, let's elect everybody, either 7 or 9 people at large, and that wouldn't be an issue. But, you know, that was a change that started in American government in 1913, and now we have over 3,000 communities around the country that elect people at large. And there are different logics, and I don't have the research in front of me, but there is some research on it. But one of the logics is to say that we want people elected at large because they have the sort of the community as a whole as their sort of point of reference.
Well, keep in mind, even though we run in districts here, the whole township, the whole town votes on them. So in cities, like some cities in Indiana, I think Bloomington too, is an example. I live in District 2. The people that vote for District 2 is the entire town. All that signifies is where the person representing it has to live. And I know that the thought process behind that, at least from my point of view, is to make sure that we don't get somebody all in this clustered together and that it represents the entire town and now township. So the districts, yes, you have to live in a certain place, but the entire town votes on them. So you're right, it does satisfy the situation where people have to represent the whole town because the whole town's voting for them.
Yeah. My point is simply that there are 3,000 communities around the country that that sort of opted in the direction beginning in 1913, which is over 100 years ago, for at-large representation. So the sort of the standard in Indiana is an outlier.
Yep, I do understand.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
An outlier, or as I would say, very 19th century.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, hearing no further discussion, I will move to call the vote. The motion is to adopt the 4.2% map as presented. I vote yes. Kevin?
Yes.
Dr. Sanders?
Yes.
William Ellis?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
I don't even, that's for all of us.
All right, now let's take a look at the final reorganization plan, the discussion of what maybe our next steps are for next week.
Are there any committee reports that I have sent everybody my thoughts on them? Did anybody have any thoughts based on, not that I'm running things, but that I gave my opinions? Does anybody else feel that the ones I feel that are ready to accept, do we want to discuss those and get some of them approved tonight? And make any necessary changes that are low-hanging fruit?
I looked at the way you scored everything and I agreed. I don't know about everybody else. So basically, go ahead.
Approve them through several subcommittee reports tonight if we have the opportunity. So, William, which ones would you like to talk about first?
Well, I'm thinking since we just did the voting map,
Okay.
governance may be the easiest
Okay.
of those two. And get any public comments before we kind of close that to see if there's anything we missed, because, again, just my opinion, I'm suggesting that we approve the 7 council members, and with the township trustee position to be a town employee, and then we would put, the hours flexibility, or put that somehow into the salary ordinance, that when we do that, so the job just gets done, but they still have that.
Yeah.
They're not having to work a certain amount of time. It's the office that would do that.
So should we, before diving in, should we consider, like, how do we want to approach each of these?
Yeah.
As a
Right.
committee, are we going to take them one by one, and then each of us kind of gives feedback and, gives our thoughts, and we have kind of an open discussion among our group?
Or do we want to identify particular issues and discuss them rather than going person by person by person? We
Right.
have several different options there.
Yeah.
I'm okay with either way.
I'd like to do, subcommittee by subcommittee.
Definitely, yes.
And then if anybody's got any opposition to the way that the subcommittee has presented their findings, then bring that up per subcommittee.
So in other words, we'll look at governance.
And
Anybody on the committee who has input or wants to discuss.
Any
a certain
amendment or change?
amendment to that, and then open it up to the public. Do that for each of the subcommittees.
Right, we won't be able to get through all of them today.
Right.
Obviously. But we have, again, this is not for us, but we have next Monday
And
and
next
next
Wednesday.
Wednesday. And Wednesday will be, I'd say, when we get the final one approved. Pulling up subcommittee reports.
So the main two issues on the governance report are going to be the composition of the board, whether it is a 7 or 9 member board, and then also the question of the conversion of the elected trustees office to an employee on a salaried position of the town, correct?
Correct.
Or was that, the township report was in this finance subcommittee report, wasn't it?
Well, but the governance would depend on,
Okay.
I think, this one. I'm looking for the subcommittee report now.
To make sure everyone in the public understands the governance options, they presented two possibilities, option 1 and option 2. Option 1 begins with the 7-member structure on January 1st, 2027, and keeps that structure in place. Option 2 uses a 9-member transition board during 2027 only, then moves to the same 7-member structure on January 1st, 2028. So the question is whether or not we want to create 2 single-year temporary seats to make sure that representation is as broadly spread out across the considered area as possible in that first transition year.
What would be the benefit of that?
well,
I think
not a whole lot of representation to the township right now on the board after the election in November, if the reorganization takes place. Matter of fact, you've got 2 members versus 5 members.
Yeah, I think that's the balance that we need to think through, right? I mean, because the complexity is higher
Yes.
with the 9. And as you pointed out earlier, there's the challenge of figuring out what happens to the 2 extra, how is that decision made? But in terms of that broad representation that you mentioned, like, having the additional 2 for that temporary period does make it, at least, from an optics perspective and maybe from a practical perspective as well, make it clear that it isn't just the existing town council members that will have a year
Right.
with, I don't want to say free reign, but, with a year where they would really dominate any discussions around policies or things that impacted the now township.
Especially when you're asking voters to vote on it, that there appears they've got no representation. Not that the whole board wouldn't represent the whole reorganization, but that's the way it's going to appear before the election.
Yeah, I think that would be that's a good point, because I think that, if we're asking the voters to approve this,
Yeah, there's at
the
least,
larger number makes it not look as though voters are being asked to diminish their representation temporarily.
especially when it brings more population to the table, the reorganization does. So there's at least 3 districts out of the 5 that are made up, if not majority, awfully close to majority of township that aren't getting represented because there's no way for them to be represented in the current.
My understanding, though, is that anybody currently anywhere in Richland Township or the town of Ellettsville can run for the township board because we are all Richland Township
Too
residents.
late, but it's too late to declare, isn't it?
It's too late to declare, but the idea that the Richland Township Board is only the people from the township and not anybody from the town is not technically true.
But this is mostly township, this is mostly township, this is all township. and then this is Bean Blossom.
Okay.
So you'd have 5 members representing this, and the majority of the population would feel like they're not getting represented.
I understand.
Could I point out
Go
something
ahead.
that's unique about the upcoming elections? Well, it's not unique, but it does change things a bit. 2 of the existing board members will not be running in the next election. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So there'll be people vying for those positions that will be entirely new board members, never have served, I believe, on
But
this
they're-
board. So I don't know if it helps with the argument of how much township representation there will be, but since everyone will be voting for these people,
They're not
everybody in the
just incumbents
township
being carried
town,
over.
it won't be the old block of town board members that will exist after. They'll only, theoretically, there only could be 3 on there that was old block town board members. And so the makeup of the board will be new. Exactly where they live and how technical you want to be about how represented everybody is. I'll not argue all that, but it will be a different board moving forward, no matter what.
Sure, but playing devil's advocate, the folks that are running for the office in this upcoming election are from the town. They're not from the township.
I understand that, but I just wanted to point out that an old block will not
Sure.
take the ball and run with it. It'll be a new team, no matter what.
I have a suggestion that might alleviate the, if we go with the 9-person board, one of the other questions is what happens with the other 2? If we go with the 9-person board, how about 2 of the members from that 9-person, they're going to be on the plan commission. Those are going to be those would be the temporary board members. In other words, hypothetically, I think we have 4 people running for township
I thought
board
it
right
was
now.
3.
Well, there's 3 that'll be elected, but 4 running. We have a fluke, which is kind of good in a sense.
Is that right, Dawn? Okay.
So, again, what we could do is have that temporary 9, and the top 2 vote getters, if they want to be on council, they get to. The bottom 2, they would be on our plan commission and still on the council, if we want to do the 9, but they would be the temporary ones.
I disagree with that.
Okay.
Because it's the elected officials that, with the exception of 2 spots, who appoint people to the planning commission, and it's almost like a parting gift. I don't think we should do that. I like the idea of having option 2, and at the end, at 28, then their term expires, and it's a 7-member board. So,
Well, I guess the plan commission, that's the other thing we haven't, I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse. I think we would need to expand that also.
oh yeah, no doubt. But first things first. So, another thing too, in consideration, historically, we've been a more conservative and Republican-led community. However, remember the independents and Libertarian and Democrats still can have a caucus this summer and have other people run for office, being especially now there's a new aura in the air. So I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. So there's going to be a difference. So I think we have an opportunity to get it right. And my 2 cents anyways, I think option 2, either one's good. Option 2 just a little bit better.
Yeah, I was originally, when I first read the subcommittee report, I was leaning more toward option 1, but as I've further considered it, I'm leaning more toward option 2 for all the reasons that have been mentioned by others up here, but also in the sense that in that first year of a reorganized entity, there's going to be a lot of decisions that are going to be made that are going to set the tone and the framework to implement this plan.
Right.
And I think that actually raises the need to ensure that there's a geographically broad set of representation.
That makes sense.
So that it doesn't feel as though that first year's decisions are all being set, whether in reality or just from people's perception,
Right.
by the town, the existing town, as opposed to the township.
And I guess what I'm more interested in is the opposition to the idea of the reorganization from the township. Okay, what do we get? Okay, and we can make all the arguments about tax and planning and governance and all that stuff, but really what they're looking for is representation. They've not had representation for decades. Okay, you can say they've had representation, but I, for one, don't feel like I've been represented.
So I will say that right now, the 3 board members that are for the trustee's office, excuse me, they just happen to not live within the town limits. The 4 people who are running for the new board, 3 of them do not live in the town limits, but 1 does, if I'm not mistaken.
That is true.
And so we could potentially have a new trustee elected board that has 2 township and 1 town person. So
With the 3 that are running.
with the
4.
with the 4 that are
With the
running,
4
because
that are
and they're all running on the same party, so it's only going to be 3 that go into the fall.
So I guess what I was saying is, I want this to happen, okay? And I want to eliminate all the opposition, front load it, okay?
Right.
And try to eliminate, and that's one of the sticking points.
I'd like to come back for a second to what Mike objected to earlier about the planning commission, because I'm not sure I understood it. We are potentially considering expanding the planning and zoning board to have 2 additional seats. Is that correct, William?
That was a discussion I wanted to have. I don't know.
I need to interrupt. I don't think you can expand the plan commission to 9. I think
No.
you're limited
Well-
to 7 for the plan commission, 5 for the BZA.
It would be, the plan commission would just be 7 people.
Correct. I don't think you can expand it to 9 if I.
No, we would not be expanding it to 9. We'd be expanding it from the 5 to 7. And the council appointments for those years would be other 2 people from the township, not the town incorporated.
So they have dual roles.
Yes.
And Mike, your objection to the idea of having the 2 temporary seats 8 and 9, also be on the planning commission is because that's not the normal method for appointing people to the planning commission?
That's my understanding, yes. I think this should be a council appointment at that point, not put in the reorganization plan. That should be a decision made by the new council.
And unfortunately, that new council, we could recommend that they do that. But there's 2, I believe by our ordinance, or I don't know if, I think it's by state law, Darla, Eric, you can correct me, 2 of the people in planning have to be from the council. Or is it a town employee?
They're a government representative.
Okay.
Is the crux of the question, how do we choose which 2 seats are temporary? Is that really what this hinges on?
That would solve that, but also, to Mike's concern, 5 seats are still going to be, even if we say these 2 seats are for, again, just speculating out loud, the bottom 2 vote getters, or however we figure this out, the council will still be appointing 5 of those 7 members without us any recommendations, just in the normal cycle of things.
Correct.
Since you mentioned my name, I'd like to say one more thing. After listening to Kevin, I was pretty sure it should be a 7-member board, just my own opinion. And now I'm thinking it actually should be a 9-member board to answer the question, am I going to be represented if I'm in the Richland Township? And it's one of the things that we've put up in the front of why they might want to do this. I mean, I've said it 100, if not
Are
more
you thinking a
times.
9-member board permanently?
No, I'm
Okay.
just talking about to get us over the hump,
Right.
to make sure the township is assured that immediate representation in that first, as Scott said, that important year when things may come up that needs, broad thought and everybody's input. So I think
agree.
I'm leaning towards, I think the problem you have, which it should be solvable, is how do you figure out which 2 people You might have a couple volunteers after the first year, but which two people would drop off, so.
And am I understanding it correctly that actually we only have 3 that would be obvious
That would be elected.
elected picks? So the other question we have is then how do we select the 4th?
So I'd like to take a pause for our conversation and allow a couple minutes for the public.
Now, we only have 8 minutes remaining in our meeting.
Yeah,
so
I appreciate that.
I don't think we'll get governance done today.
I'll be quick. Besides Carmichael, I was on the governance committee, so I just wanted to add some color to your guys' discussion and say that I know it can get complicated and confusing, 7 versus 9 or whatever, but that was exactly the intention of what we put forward. I do live in the township, and that's what I see is the beauty of this process, and maybe a very big positive is right now, go to school here, you know, my kids play sports here, frequent downtown, etc. But I don't have a way to be a representative because I don't live in the township, or I don't live in the town, I live out in the township. So that was a big part of our discussion, and how could we, ultimately they all get to a 7-member board, which I think is the right size, and it would be, as you guys spoke earlier, the 5 districts, 2 at large. I think it all gets to one place where it makes a lot of sense. How you get there and quickly get there to offer representation didn't have easy answers. We threw out other options or other proposals. They all led to special elections, which cost money and take time and are confusing and add even more of a cloud to it. There was no direct answer to get equal or close to equal representation from the township and the town board without completely starting from scratch for election or something else that we were told just legally wasn't really possible or fiscally wasn't possible. So I wanted to add that color for anyone else as well. That was mostly what we talked about, is how could the township get representation and get it faster. Unfortunately, there's no magic bullet or magic pill that does that quickly without running into a bunch of other confusing mechanisms and costly deals. So that's why we presented these 2 options. If there's another option out there, I don't think people would fight you on it, but we didn't see one, and I don't think there was one. So that's how we came up with the 7 and the 9. I know it's not perfect. I know it's not confusing, but that's the color and the heart behind it. You guys basically had our conversations over again in 10 minutes. So, but did want that out there for the public and for comment as I ask questions. Why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? That was our main concern, is how does the township have representation as quickly as possible. I wish it was a little bit better, but I didn't write the laws or the rules, so there you go.
Well,
Thank you, Tyson.
Dawn, and to those from the township, first of all, I'm leaning, I understand we need the 9 board temporary. That's kind of, on how to choose those, how about the 3 people that get elected for township board, they choose them. They choose the other 2 members that would represent on the
Before
council.
we decide that tonight, if we're all leaning towards the temporary 9-member, let's think about that over the weekend and
No,
address it again. Monday.
absolutely. That's why I wanted to throw this out there so we could think about
Have
how to do
conversations
that. Yeah,
amongst us.
but that's one option.
Let's let
Whatever
Valerie
3
talk.
board members are elected, they can pick the people.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, just quickly, Valerie DeWar, Township resident. I'm all for this whole reorganization thing, so that's not the issue. But I'm kind of looking at words, and the word temporary kind of sends a warning signal to me. If I were a township resident that was not sure how I felt about this, and someone said, oh, for a few years, you're going to have 4 people, we're going to give you 2 temporary people, because that's what I'm hearing if you're uninformed. And then you say, okay, fine, so they get us in, and then they take away 2 of our people? I don't know. I'm just thinking maybe you might want to think about that temporary word, because it might sound like a way to convince and then grab you.
Would transitional?
Transitional sounds really good, Dawn. Yeah. And like I said, I'm just into that whole thing. Thank you.
We're not going to make any decisions tonight. So any further discussion on, I think, if I'm wrong, I'm gathering we're leaning towards the 9. We just
Might just take
we
kind
just
of an
need to
informal
figure out
straw
what to
poll.
do with the 2
I'm
temporary.
leaning towards the 9.
I'm in favor of the 9 as well.
That was option 2 as presented, right?
Yes.
Yes.
We just need to figure out what to do with the 2 that would be going off.
Right.
The transitional.
The transitional.
The transitional interim board member.
Temporary is out of the world. We're not using temporary anymore.
Right. I think that would be
whole
great
new
though,
vocabulary.
if the elected township board from this November election, if they choose who they want to represent on the council and who they want to represent on planning, for that, to me, would be great to show. And the ones that they recommend for planning, is that temporarily, no, not temporary, it's the interim council members. But keep in mind, planning and zoning, and most of those decisions, they would still be on the plan commission. So they're still gonna have an active voice in the vision.
But the planning commission doesn't make a decision. They just make a recommendation.
Well,
Council makes the decision.
that is on some things. I mean, but for the most part, you're right.
You know, you could end up liking 9 people, so you gotta think
Yeah,
about that too.
and that's another thing. How do you do that? How do you do that once all the elections are in cycle? I mean, that's a tough one.
For 9, if you did 9,
Well, how do you continue it? And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not transitional, it becomes a 9-member board,
well, then I'd
which
say,
in all honesty, that makes sense to me,
Have your 5 districts and then have 4
For at large.
for at
yeah,
large.
and they would be 4 years after.
And do
So
you,
2031 would be, they'd still be on, 2431, they would be the first one time they would be on the ballot.
well, there's an election in 27.
Correct.
Yeah, there's an election in 27. Why couldn't you do 4 additional in 27?
I mean, the 4 at large in 27,
In 27.
because they wouldn't take office till 28, and you'd still have 27.
It's a month and a half.
No, the election in 27, that, they don't take office until 28, but all those decisions and the whole reason, or are you saying the ones that ones are interim appointments, then they all run again, if they want to?
If they want to, okay, if they want to, or other people can run also.
I mean, I don't have an issue with that, I just think that,
In all honesty, if you're redoing a governance, okay, a government encompassing not just a whole lot more area, but a whole lot more people, you're doubling the size of your population, then it makes sense that, I think it makes sense that you do 4 at large.
and it really wouldn't, cost-wise, it wouldn't cost any more, because the polling places for the entire township are still, ECC and St. John's, as far as I know, I mean, so that wouldn't change. They vote there anyway. And if we're going to make a permanent 9-member board, that would make sense. They would just be on the municipal cycle.
Or another thought is if you're going to do a permanent 7-member board, a temporary 9, well, whatever you call it, transitional 9.
Right.
And a permanent 7, okay, then do, in the election in 27, do all 7, well, not all 7, you couldn't, but you could do 5 of the 7 at large and not worry about the districts.
I feel we've ranged pretty far beyond the subcommittee report
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
this point, and we are at our time limit.
Yeah.
We have a
We'll kick it
meeting,
around.
Next meeting's Monday at 6.
Yes. Monday at 6 PM here
I'll
in this
trade
room.
you. I'll take the
And there is
small
no
one for the
time limit
large one.
on that meeting.
Right.
So
Mike,
we are
So
going to get
come
through
in your
some
jammies.
I'll
subcommittee
take the
reports.
small one if you want the large one.
All right,
Okay.
meeting is concluded.